Democratic Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina told NewsNation's The Hill he won't tell President Biden to get out of the race. He did say, however, that he will give him an assessment as he sees it necessary.
What I saw last night, Thursday night, was in fact a bad night. No question about that. What caused the bad night, I'm going to leave it up to the experts. I do know this. I think that the American people want an explanation.
Congressman Clyburn is one of the most respected and influential Democrats in Congress. He's often credited with securing Biden's nomination in 2020. He says he does think President Biden is fit to serve, but he would support Vice President Kamala Harris if the president were to step aside. NewsNation contributor Kurt Bardella joining us now. He's a veteran political and media strategist. Welcome and good morning, as always. What does the administration do in this moment? We've got this all-staff call later this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, they really need to do the opposite of everything they have been doing to this point. And let me just say this, calling your ideological allies bedwetters for having the audacity to question the electability of an 82-year-old white guy, that's not a recipe to get them back in your camp. Calling people kindergarten names may work in the Republican Party. It doesn't with actual grown-ups. Stop doing that. Their initial reaction, the White House's reaction to this entire thing post-debate, was to start blaming the people who were questioning what they saw with their own eyes, not take responsibility for the bad performance, not do everything they could to reinforce the fact that they believe Joe Biden just had a bad night. Well, if that's the case, then let's see a blitzkrieg of him everywhere. Why isn't he on the phone with every major important Democrat elected official from here all the way across the country, whether it's governors, whether it's leadership, whether it's key high-profile members of Congress? It shouldn't be Jim Clyburn calling Joe Biden. It should be Joe Biden calling Jim Clyburn, calling Hakeem Jeffries, calling Chuck Schumer. To my knowledge, that hasn't quite happened yet. And the only thing I can think of as to why that hasn't happened yet is that the White House staff doesn't believe that he's capable of having these conversations and easing those fears. He'll only exacerbate them.
Who do you think, Kurt, has the most influence over the president and his state of mind right now?
Probably his family. Obviously, we all know that his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, First Lady, has an enormous amount of influence when it comes to these type of decisions. I mean, I go back to just the conversation they had about whether he should even run in the first place back in 2016, whether he wanted to put his family through it. It was that family niche that he has, his sister, obviously his son Hunter, and his wife, that talked him into doing that, saying, yeah, do this for the country. Don't worry about the toll it will take on us, the baggage that it will come, the attacks that will come, which obviously they certainly did for Hunter. So I think more than any elected official, any Democrat Party representative, it's his family that probably has the most influence at this moment in time.
And is part of the concern maybe on behalf of Democrats is another option may not beat Trump, right? At the end of the day, come November, Biden still might be the closest to beat Donald Trump.
Well, that's certainly the explanation that I think you're hearing from Team Biden, which is the risk of changing someone out now this close to the convention as the campaign is already started. I mean, this is the longest campaign in history of mankind. Feels like it's been going on forever already. And they're saying, we already beat Donald Trump once. We can do it again. Nobody else who you're contemplating has that experience of going toe-to-toe with Trump in a national campaign. Their argument really is it's too risky to make this change. I think everybody else, frankly, is saying, well, right now, if the race were held today, you would lose. We know that you would lose. And it would be, frankly, an actual red wave this time in terms of Republicans taking the House and the Senate along with the White House. So if we know that you're going to lose right now, making a change is our only chance of winning. Why would we do nothing, sit here and just play this hand out knowing it's a losing hand? That doesn't make any sense either.
What do you make of the numbers? We can put that number back up of Kamala Harris and a Trump matchup. That remains pretty close. Does that surprise you at all?
It doesn't. I think that when you look at, especially right now, how many disaffected Democrats we've had all summer long, all spring. We had this conversation about the lack of enthusiasm on the Democratic Party side, the issues that even the situation in the Middle East has caused with the president's base. Well, Kamala Harris would get to run in a way where she can take credit for the popular things of the Biden agenda, like the infrastructure bill, like the CHIPS Act, but not actually have the same type of baggage when it comes to things like foreign policy, whether it's Ukraine, Afghanistan withdrawal, the situation in the Middle East. She would have more of a clean slate there. And so it's not surprising that her numbers actually are stronger because, in part, that Democratic Party base, those numbers would be even stronger with her than they are right now with President Biden.
Let's play the hypothetical game just one more step here. In order to nominate someone else, the delegates come the convention, what would have to happen? What is the most likely and easiest path to do so if that were to be the case?
The path of least resistance for the Democratic Party, if there is going to be a change, is President Biden announces he's not going to run for re-election, releases his delegates, endorses his sitting Vice President Kamala Harris, and encourages everyone at the convention to nominate her. Kamala Harris obviously has been nationally vetted. She's been the vice president for years now. She has access to all the money that they have raised so far. That big war chest of more than $280 million would be at her disposal, so she wouldn't have to build this campaign from ground one or from dollar one, which anybody else would have to. So there are institutional advantages to having Harris step in, and it makes sense that if it's not going to be Biden, it might as well be as vice president, right?
How has this impacted Trump as we look at some of the polls? And I'm particularly thinking about independent voters who weren't happy with either candidate but saw the debate. Did those voters go to Donald Trump? Do we have any indication yet where their alliance lies?
Well, we've seen in some of the most recent polling that came out, like that CNN poll that came out yesterday that we talked a lot about on NewsNation, that, yeah, the independent voters, almost every voter who watched that debate is giving pause to voting for Biden. And I think, again, in elections, the key here is to give your people a reason to vote for you, not give them the reason to vote for the other guy. Right now, Democrats have not given those middle-of-the-road voters, those independent voters, those voters who may not even want to participate in the November election, the reason to stay with them. They're giving them more of a reason to stay home, if anything. And in an election where turnout is going to matter, we had the most robust turnout in American political history in 2020. We are unlikely to match that in 2024. That means the voting pool is smaller this time than it was last time. So you need to get votes from every demographic possible. For Democrats, that's people of color, that's women, that's a progressive base. That's the most important thing. Right now, those people are not excited about Joe Biden, and that's a systemic structural problem in the electoral math.
And to fix that in the interim, immediately, so in the next few days or weeks, what does that look like? Does that mean putting him in front of live interviews, live events that are unscripted? What does the game plan in your head look like to make this a little bit better?
Well, part one of that game plan was the president going out giving remarks from the White House after the Supreme Court decision the other night, which was a very presidential-looking setting. Today, he has that meeting with Democratic governors, which I think is a very important meeting to hear what they're saying, especially since some of those would be his potential would-be rivals or replacements, if you will. And then you have this interview with George Stephanopoulos, and I'll tell you, I don't think that we've had a TV interview that has had so much at stake since probably Sarah Palin with Katie Couric back in the 2008 campaign. The stakes for this interview are almost absurdly high compared to what the expectations were going into the debate. Remember, Joe Biden's expectations debate were pretty low. They had won the expectations game actually going into the debate. And so now all eyes are on this interview. And we can expect Stephanopoulos to do his absolute best to be almost confrontational, because if it's a softball interview, that does absolutely nothing. That's no benefit for Joe Biden. He needs to show that he can go head to head with somebody in an extemporaneous format.
Yeah, critical at a critical time. Kurt, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much.